The restaurant fell silent in an instant. A bowl of hot soup splashed across a man's shirt as people gasped and turned their heads. Standing beside the table was the mayor's daughter, 23-year-old Emily Carter, staring down at the men with a smug smile. "Maybe next time," she said loudly, "you'll learn where people like you belong." The man slowly stood up. Soup dripped from his clothes. His young daughter, no older than 8, sat frozen in her chair, fighting back tears. Everyone expected the man to shout. Instead, he calmly picked up a napkin. And then he made a phone call. One call that would change everything. David Miller was a single father. 3 years earlier, he had lost his wife to cancer. Since then, every day had been a struggle. He worked long hours, took care of his daughter Sophie, paid bills, cooked meals, and somehow still found time to attend every school event. Money was tight, but David never complained. To Sophie, he was a superhero. That afternoon they were celebrating. Sophie had earned first place in a regional science competition. David had promised her lunch at the nicest restaurant in town. It wasn't a place they usually visited. He had saved money for weeks. For Sophie, it was worth every dollar. When they arrived, some customers glanced at David's worn jacket and old shoes. But Sophie didn't care. She was smiling from ear to ear. For a while, everything was perfect. Then Emily Carter walked in. Everyone knew her. As the daughter of Mayor Robert Carter, she was famous for getting special treatment wherever she went. Employees rushed to greet her. Customers whispered. Emily loved the attention. As she passed David's table, she noticed Sophie showing her science trophy to her father. She rolled her eyes. Then she overheard David telling Sophie how proud he was. For some reason, that irritated her. She looked at David's old clothes and laughed. Interesting, she said loudly to her friends. Looks like they're letting anyone in here these days. Several people looked uncomfortable. David ignored her. He didn't want trouble. But Emily wasn't finished. She continued making comments. Each one meaner than the last. Sophie lowered her eyes. David gently squeezed her hand. "It's okay," he whispered. That should have been the end. But Emily wanted attention. As a waiter passed carrying soup, she suddenly stepped sideways. The waiter lost balance. The entire bowl spilled onto David. The restaurant gasped. Everyone knew it wasn't an accident. Yet Emily laughed. Actually laughed. Sophie burst into tears. "Why would you do that?" she cried. Emily shrugged. "Relax. It was just an accident." David looked at his soaked shirt. Then at his crying daughter. For the first time, disappointment appeared on his face. Not anger. Disappointment. He pulled out his phone. Emily smirked. "What are you going to do? Call someone?" David calmly nodded. "Yes." He dialed a number. The person answered immediately. David spoke only a few words. "Can you come to Riverside Restaurant? Right now." Then he hung up. Emily laughed again. Her friends joined her. The restaurant returned to nervous conversation. But 20 minutes later, everything changed. A black SUV stopped outside. Then another. Several people entered the restaurant. Among them was a woman in a dark business suit. The moment the manager saw her, his face turned pale. He rushed forward. "Director Thompson." The room became silent. People recognized her immediately. Sarah Thompson was the head of the state's Ethics and Accountability Commission. One of the most powerful officials in the region. She walked directly toward David. Then something unexpected happened. She smiled. "David." David stood and shook her hand. Emily's smile disappeared. Sarah looked at the soup-stained shirt. What happened? Several customers immediately began explaining. Many had recorded the incident on their phones. Video after video showed exactly what Emily had done. Sarah watched carefully. Her expression darkened. Then she turned toward Emily. "Miss Carter, is there anything you'd like to explain?" Emily suddenly looked nervous. "It was just a joke." Sarah's voice became cold. A joke. Then she asked another question. Do you know who David Miller is? Emily shook her head. Sarah looked around the room. David Miller is the citizen who helped expose corruption in 3 city contracts last year. People exchanged surprised looks. Sarah continued. Because of his evidence, taxpayers saved millions of dollars. The room grew quiet. Nobody had known. David never talked about it. Sarah folded her arms. And for the past 6 months, our office has been investigating reports involving favoritism connected to the mayor's administration. Emily's face turned white. Sarah pointed toward the videos customers had recorded. Today's behavior will become part of that investigation. Now Emily looked terrified. Wait, what? Sarah wasn't finished. She explained that multiple complaints had already been filed regarding abuse of power, preferential treatment, and unethical conduct surrounding the mayor's office. This public incident added even more evidence. The restaurant was completely silent. Emily realized this wasn't about spilled soup anymore. This was about years of behavior finally catching up with people who thought they were untouchable. A week later, the story was everywhere. Videos of the restaurant incident spread across social media. Public outrage exploded. More witnesses came forward. More evidence appeared. Investigations intensified. Within months, Mayor Robert Carter resigned. Several officials connected to his administration were removed from office. The scandal ended a political career that many had once considered unstoppable. And Emily? For the first time in her life, she learned that family influence couldn't protect her from consequences. As for David, he returned to his normal life. He didn't seek attention. He didn't give interviews. He simply continued raising Sophie. One evening, months later, Sophie asked him a question. Dad, why didn't you yell at her? David smiled. Then he looked at his daughter. Because character isn't shown by how we act when things are easy. He gently tapped her science trophy. It's shown by what we do when people treat us badly. Sophie nodded. She would never forget that lesson. And neither would the people who witnessed that afternoon. Because sometimes the loudest response isn't anger. Sometimes it's one calm phone call. A phone call that lets the truth speak for itself.